Martin Scorsese's first attempt at a mainstream picture just happened to become one of the most revered pieces of American cinema, entering the zeitgeist immediately upon its release. After making Mean Streets, Scorsese finally got the opportunity to adapt the screenplay written by Paul Schrader and collaborate once again with his future filmic partner, Robert De Niro, but this time on a much more introspective and lurid journey. I don't think people anticipated that the therapeutic writings of a 20-something dealing with inner-city solitude would hit such a nerve with the audience. What was originally thought of as a very personal story may have just arrived at the right time. Taxi Driver is a film that deals with loneliness, self-hatred, obsession, and the need to belong. If you've seen my Apocalypse Now analysis, you'll notice that this analysis will be structured chronologically as opposed to thematically, simply because I think the themes of this movie become more evident when they become amplified through Travis's downward spiral. Even though the film follows a single character whose characteristics are on the extreme end of a spectrum, the experience as a whole can still be seen as a relatable one. All of the emotions that make up Travis are all emotions that we have to deal with. We are his existential complex, his yearning to be included. We just don't admit it. Or perhaps we're more like Travis than we thought, in that we don't want to admit it. Taxi Driver, I believe, is a story that's more about an essential aspect of the human condition, rather than just a glimpse into the mind of a madman. Because as the film shows us, we all have the capacity to become Travis Bickle. It's simply a case of whether or not we want to be.
He said, well, I've hitchhiked down from Seattle. I saw this movie, Taxi Driver. Who told you about me? And I said, well, so let me get this straight. You probably were a taxi driver. You wrote about being a taxi driver, and you feel that I have somehow stolen your idea. He said, no. No, he said, I was never a taxi driver. I want you to know who told you about me. And I realized, that he was that thing. And actually, I was sort of a little concerned that he might be armed. And I said to him, I said, you may think that the pain you are going through is terribly unique, but it isn't.
The film opens with what could be mistaken for the opening of a horror movie. The credits appear in deep, saturated reds as a vehicle only partially in view bursts through the smoke-ridden streets. There's a lot of horror iconography here. With the camera a little askew, things seem very unsettling, and this ominous opening sets the anxious tone that we see repeated throughout the movie. The smoke subsides as we see the eyes of which this world is going to be siphoned through. These uncertain and paranoid eyes become all the more justifiable when we see what they see. New York, but not quite as we know it. Through a process called chemtone, we see the streets in a very high contrast with extremely blown out colours. The result is a luminescent world, but at the same time one that's overwhelmed by darkness. This is a perfect metaphor for how Travis views his world, because even though there is just as much light, he chooses to focus on the darker aspects. The smoke and slow motion give the streets a more monstrous and sentient quality. Through the imagery alone, these streets are pictured to be menacing. What we have in this opening is the skewed perspective of our main character. Travis is exceptionally biased on his outlook of the world, which is important as the rest of the movie is to be examined through this haunted gaze. In the introduction, some themes have already been established, that Travis appears distant from reality, and he sees the world differently to us. Travis enters the depot with the smoke from outside following him, as though he's exiting from his own personal hell. It's in the depot that we get our first look at Travis, as well as the off-kilter shooting style that this film presents us with. Here's a very ordinary scene, but there's something off about the framing and positioning of the camera. In terms of composition, both shots are slightly off-centre. In most movies, the focal point would in fact be Wizard. But here's what we learn about Taxi Driver. As a first-person narrative, we have to analyse things from the mind of Travis. This is what Travis notices, not the standard behaviour right in front of him, but the confrontation in the background of his world. While his attention should be directed towards his boss, he decides to only view the world's ugly side. Now, even though this scene is only our first legitimate scene, there's a lot of themes established here that continue for the rest of the movie. From the get-go, Travis is constantly isolated, showing us the key theme of loneliness. In the depot, he's separated from Wizard by a glass window, the same way he's estranged from the rest of the world in his cab. It keeps him shielded from the outside world, and even when with fares, Travis only looks at them through his mirror. He ensures that he keeps his distance, showing us just how removed he is from the world. This scene shows us Travis getting a job with the taxi company.
No, ride around nights mostly, subways, buses. Figure, I'm gonna do that, I might as well get paid for it.
It's a very basic scene, but happens to feature a very important line.
I work anytime, anywhere.
We work Jewish holidays?
Anytime, anywhere.
Which I'll get to in a second. And it also features the first overhead shot, which will be explained at the end of this analysis. However, at this point, I'd like to bring up something that's very important to the movie's style. A lot of people notice that even when compared to other Scorsese films, there are certain points in Taxi Driver where the techniques of the film become very intrusive. The closest definition I could think of for this style is emotional filmmaking. By this, I mean that the camera works in a very specific way. Not in the way that, say, the camera works in a Kubrick film, where you have to decipher the symbolism of the camera from an anthropological or more symbolic perspective, but from an emotional point of view. This happens for the duration of Taxi Driver. In these opening scenes, when Travis becomes agitated, the camera moves in and things become more claustrophobic.
If you're gonna break my chops, you can take it on the arches right now, you understand?
Sorry, sir, I didn't mean that.
Outside the depot, there's a dissolve, which typically is used to move ahead in time, yet simply brings Travis closer to us, almost suggesting that the film and Travis aren't quite in sync, and that Travis isn't in tune with the world. It's this emotional filmmaking perspective that's vital to explaining Taxi Driver, because the film tells the story of Travis's inner turmoil, so a lot of these techniques aren't to be explained on a precise symbolic level, they just feel right. We then get a more intimate glimpse into Travis's existence, as we get to see how he lives. On a shelf, we see what appears to be a Vietnamese flag. We saw at the depot Travis was wearing a jacket with a King Kong Company logo, and we were also told of his previous military history.
Military record.
Honorable discharge, May 1973.
This brings us to what is possibly the most important element of the themes of Taxi Driver. Now, we all know that the film is unequivocally about loneliness. In the original script, it begins with Thomas Wolfe's poem God's Lonely Man. However, what makes Taxi Driver excel is that Travis's exclusion and his eventual downfall is all self-inflicted. The following scene is Travis in his taxi on his daily grind. We delve further into his mind through his diary entries to learn his feelings on the world that he inhabits.
All the animals come out at night. Whores, skunk pussies, buggers, queens, fairies, dopers, junkies. Sick, venal.
Travis clearly hates this fraction of society that he often finds himself in. But this brings me to the quote that Travis said earlier.
Wanna work uptown night, South Bronx, Harlem?
For work anytime, anywhere.
Travis puts himself in these situations. The reason that Travis is lonely, and the reason that he despises so much of his surroundings, is because he forces himself to. He hates seeing the worst sides of humanity, yet he only operates in the worst parts. He'll work anytime, anywhere. In his diary update, he boasts about earning so much money.
I can take in $350 a week, sometimes even more when I do it off the meter.
And yet later at the Belmore Cafe, we see that he hasn't spent any of it, and his living conditions suggest that he's not a man concerned with material goods. The main reason why Travis is a misanthropist is because he forces that mindset onto himself. He forces himself to bear witness to the most miserable parts of humanity, and as we see, Travis only sees the bad sides anyway. Travis's cab is the symbol for Travis's isolation, drifting through the streets, watching the people through his adjusted view of the rain-drenched windows. Travis simply won't admit these facts to himself. As we will find, he is a habitual liar. He convinces himself the facts are otherwise. He says this in his diary entry.
All my life needed was a sense of some place to go. I don't believe that one should devote his life to morbid self-attention.
Yet that's exactly what he does. We also hear during this voiceover that Travis's plan is already etched into his mind after years of being surrounded by urban decay.
Someday a rail rain will come and wash all the scum off the streets.
The taxi is an iron coffin for Travis. Much like how in his apartment we see iron bars on the windows, it highlights Travis's lonely world. There's an enclosed, rigid nature of Taxi Driver's shooting and framing that give the feeling of a man entombed. In this case, perhaps it's in the recesses of his own mind. Travis can't escape his thoughts, and he's often unaware that he's acting on this less than conscious level. Even outdoor scenes like this are very claustrophobic, and still show isolation for our character outside of his work. After Travis's first fare, we see him enter the porno theatre and attempt to flirt with a female worker.
Can I help you?
Yeah, what's your name? My name is Travis.
That's nice. What can I do for you?
A common theme is Travis's obsession with relationships, and the few female characters that he interacts with, he continually seems to show some sort of infatuation with. The female form is always on his mind. On the edges of this scene, we see symbolism of a statue emphasizing this. Yet flirting with the girl behind the desk here, who obviously shows no interest, shows that Travis often pursues things that he can never have, and this once more is only damaging for his own psyche.
Let's not have any trouble, okay?
What are you talking about? Why won't you talk to me? Why won't you talk to me? Why don't you answer my calls when I call? You think I don't know you're here?
Let's not have
He buys some snacks, and it's here that we see the second overhead shot. Now we have the taxi forms and the junk food. Inside the theatre, things are just as confined as we've seen so far, and as Travis sits down, he's surrounded by unrecognisable faces. Travis is alone, even in a room full of nobodies. His vacant stare at the screen is one of a quizzical nature rather than one of arousal. He's at this theatre because he needs to see the seedy side of the world, the only world he feels exists.
All my life needed was a sense of some place to go.
The following shot is our first objective look at New York. The colours are brighter, the camera freer, the imagery warmer. This is such a stark contrast to the dark, uncomfortable picture portrayed so far, and that's because this is the world without Travis. It's moments like this that show us that although the film is from Travis's perspective, that doesn't mean that he's right. There may be a world out there that is terrible and is hopeless, but there's also good out there that the majority of people can thrive in. Yet this more serene view of mankind does not last long, as Travis's words melt away any beauty this world has, as his words take supremacy over the screen.
They cannot touch her.
Here we meet Betsy, the object of Travis's infatuation. She stands out to Travis as the only pure thing in this vile world, shown moving through the crowd as an almost angelic character. Travis's mission is to save this woman from the streets, as she deserves better than this. Inside Palantine headquarters, we're introduced to a new character, Tom. The contrast to Travis in this scene is not the environment, but the people. We've moved to an interior location, and therefore are looking into the personalities of this world. Here we see that Tom's biggest concerns are dealing with minutiae.
Now, all the ones we had before, and our slogan is "We are the people," and R is underlined. These new buttons have "We" underlined. That reads "We are the people." Well, I think there's a difference. "We are the people" is not the same as "We are the people."
Much different than what Travis deems his primary issues. Tom shows that it is possible to live in a world outside of Travis's if you don't choose to look for the negativity. A simple conclusion for a very unusual character.
And I remember the funny story to me was that at the end of the movie, Paul Schrader came up to me and he said, "Thank you very much. Your character was the only one I didn't really know." And I'm thinking, I was the one you didn't know? That's just a simple guy who has a daily job.
Now this scene continues in a very ordinary manner with very irrelevant dialogue. It's only when Betsy mentions Travis that things shift.
Look over there.
I love you.
Notice anything?
Both Betsy and Tom look almost directly into the camera. Travis's paranoid mental state brings with it a sense of dread and anxiety in the movie's shooting style. The style here switches as Betsy and Tom have entered Travis's world as he gazes into theirs.
Near.
How long has he been there?
I don't know, but it feels like a long time.
Travis doesn't notice that they stare at him. His attention is completely focused on Betsy. Tom approaches the car and Travis hurriedly rushes away.
You're blocking our doorway. You think you might want to move the cab?
We see Travis on another night shift. He gazes at an affectionate couple, showing again Travis's preoccupation with relationships and obtaining that which he can never have. For all we know, his attention may solely be on the girl, as a look of longing. Once more, Travis spends his time drudging through the seedier parts of New York. You can't help but think that if you were in his shoes, seeing this every day could affect your mind. But Travis ignores that fact. He's the ultimate misanthrope, evaluating an entire person's existence in a passing glance. We know that the more time Travis spends in this environment, the worse things will get for him, and yet we see his fare slowly rise and the same traffic light display over and over again. This is showing us that Travis is spending more time where he shouldn't, seeing the same imagery. The world around Travis is beginning to fuel his paranoia and hatred. The following scene takes place at the Belmore Cafe, and this is probably the closest Travis gets to any kind of solidarity. Yet even in a room of his colleagues, he's still shown as the outcast. During their conversation, Wizard and Doughboy are framed together showing a bit of Travis. Travis is framed alone. We saw a similar instance with Travis and his boss at the depot.
I can't sleep nights.
Even in the seating composition, Travis is noticeably more distant than the rest of the group. He's forever the loner. Wizard, who plays a more paternal role with Travis, introduces him to Charlie T, who Travis then envisions in a threatening manner.
Travis, you know Doughboy, Charlie T?
Hey, Travis, I changed for a nickel.
He then also does this to the pimps across the room.
You run all over town, don't you, Travis?
It's here that we begin to notice a racial connotation with Travis's hatred. Earlier we heard Travis using racial slurs.
Don't make no difference to me. It does to some. Some won't even take spooks. Don't make no difference to me.
Driver 48th and 6, please.
We'll begin to see more of this as the film progresses. But what's an even more interesting idea? Is Travis imagining these menacing looks? Is he convincing himself that the world is in fact against him? In the Criterion commentary, Scorsese says something very interesting regarding the shooting of real scenes.
I just thought that fantasy is so real to the person who's having it. I think that's a good example of it is like if you're really upset about something and you can't sleep and you're imagining, I should have said that. And then you imagine this so vividly. If you can't sleep, there's no way you can sleep because it's real to you. The feelings are real, and therefore it should be portrayed the same way. It shouldn't have, fog around the edges and shouldn't have people zooming in and out on their faces. You should really do it as realistically as possible.
We'll also see examples of this later in the film. It's clear that Travis's paranoia is interfering with his life, so this wouldn't seem like an outlandish idea. Although Travis's revulsion may be more noticeable with other ethnic groups, it's not exclusively directed at them. Travis questions everyone, and soon begins to hate everyone. When Doughboy speaks to Travis for the first time, Travis's delusions are searching for an ulterior motive.
So how's it hanging? What's that?
The most nothing statement requires a double take from Travis, and it's here we realise that the most passive event is moulded into something much more dangerous in the depths of his mind. This becomes more evident with the infamous water shot. It begins with something benign, yet Travis has to stare at it until he finds something else.
I never use mine. I'm conservative, you know? It's a good thing to have just as a threat.
It begins as nothing, but the camera gets tighter and it becomes more and more threatening, as does everything that's filtered through Travis's eyes.
I'm gonna go do my dirt.
More and more we're beginning to see Travis's bias in believing that the world is a hopeless place. Even in his own circle, Wizard discusses a funny story that keeps the crew's attention.
What'd you do? I throw the meter, you know. And I jump in the back seat and I whip it out. I said, you know what this is? She says, it's love, you know, I mean, I fuck the brains out.
When it's Travis's turn, he doesn't speak about Betsy, the election, or even the couple he saw. He talks about the vermin of the city.
Well, I heard on the radio some fleet driver from Bell just got all cut up.
Stick up?
No, he got cut up by some crazy fucker. Cut half his ear off.
What we have here are men that are in the same situation as Travis, and yet they manage to deal with life's shortcomings. But that's the secret behind Travis. He doesn't want to.
Terribly.
Back at the offices of Palantine, we see Tom and Betsy engage in more trivialities, as well as foreshadow a later event in the movie.
If you had these 3 fingers missing on this hand, and that hand missing on that hand, how would you like the match?
Again, this scene is shot very blandly, yet when Travis approaches the building, the shooting style takes on a much more sinister quality. As he enters inside, the camera becomes handheld, showing that Travis is bringing his instability to a stable world. Here, Travis shows his yearning for the female form by asking Betsy out.
Yeah, it's Travis. He's a ladies' man.
Interestingly with this scene, Travis's obsession is so great that the man who is convinced that people are watching him is so consumed by Betsy that he never notices when people actually are watching him. He also didn't notice in an earlier scene. Travis asks Betsy out on a date, and it's here we see more about the lying aspect of Travis. He's thus far convinced himself that he's alone in a world of filth, but subconsciously he knows that not to be true. And so in this conversation, he externalizes those emotions onto Betsy.
I think you're a lonely person. I drive by this place a lot, and I see you here. I see a lot of people around you, and I see all these phones and all this stuff on your desk. That means nothing. And then when I came inside and I met you, I saw in your eyes and I saw the way you carried yourself that you're not a happy person. And I think you need something.
He claims that Betsy doesn't fit in this world, when in fact that description was more appropriate of himself. Even though he's lying about Betsy's persona, the camera slowly zooms out, making the frame much more open, and including Betsy with Travis, as here Travis is making a genuine connection. One note that needs to be made about this conversation is that Travis mentions Betsy's eyes.
And then when I came inside and I met you, I saw in your eyes and I saw the way you carried yourself.
This is something that will be elaborated on later. You may have also noticed that Betsy's desk was the 3rd top-down shot we've seen so far. Betsy accepts Travis's offer for a date, and we see him waiting outside for her. Presumably, he waited out there and did nothing else for the rest of the day. The date plays out similarly to how things were at the Belmore Diner. Travis is framed alone while Betsy isn't, with his back turned to the goings-on of the outside world. During this conversation, Travis once more mentions Betsy's eyes.
You know you have beautiful eyes.
Now there's a lot going on in this scene, but we're going to have to leave it until later, because this scene is more relevant when compared to a later one. But what we do gather from this scene is that we get a really good look at Travis's obsession with Betsy.
When I walked in and I saw you two sitting there, I could just tell by the way you were both relating that there was no connection whatsoever. And I felt when I walked in that there was something between us. There was an impulse that we were both following. So that gave me the right to come in and talk to you. Otherwise, I never would have felt that I had the right to talk to you or say anything to you.
He's claiming that they're soulmates, as if they were destined to be with one another. He's setting himself up for failure, and this is just another example of Travis's self-hatred. At this point, it's borderline masochistic behaviour. However, one thing that needs to be mentioned is a quote from Betsy.
He's a prophet. He's a prophet and a pusher. Partly truth, partly fiction. Walking contradiction.
This quote once again puts Travis slightly on edge.
I'm no pusher, I never have pushed.
But so it should, because that's exactly what Travis is. He sees himself as a Puritan, and yet at the same time lives in filth and is completely disconnected from society. Later, he exercises frequently, yet has a dreadful diet. He hates the scum of the movie, yet he associates frequently in it and visits porn theatres. Travis is a complete contrarian, as if his body won't do what his mind wants. Paul Schrader had this in mind even with the character's name.
I was looking for a name that would hang in mind, that would be part romantic and part vulgar. So the Travis was romantic because it conjured up images of travel. And so, and Bickle, so it just seemed like a kind of unpleasant, vulgar kind of name to mix with Travis.
Again, this emphasises that subconscious nature of Travis lying to convince himself. But why would he do that? Well, that becomes much clearer in the following scene.
I don't mind going out to California without the right preparation. That's going to get us in trouble. I'll tell you.
Are you Charles Palantine, the candidate?
Travis meets the candidate Palantine in his car. Now it's in this scene that we see Travis for the first time actually voice his opinions on the world around him.
Whatever it is, he should clean up this city here, because this city here is like an open sewer, you know? It's full of filth and scum. And sometimes I can hardly take it. Whatever becomes the president should just really clean it up. You know what I mean? Sometimes I go out and I smell it, I get headaches, it's so bad, you know? And they just never go away, you know? It's like, I think that the president should just clean up this whole mess here. He should just flush it right down the fucking toilet.
Travis claims to be a saviour, the man that can change everything, but this dialogue shows that truthfully, he just wants to destroy everything.
Damn straight.
At the end of the conversation between Palantine and Travis, Travis vehemently believes that Palantine can change the city.
You're a good man, I know you're gonna win.
Thank you.
He even encourages his fares to vote for him.
I'm one of your biggest supporters, you know. I tell everybody that comes in this taxi that they have to vote for you.
Yet by the end of the film, Travis's plan is to kill Palantine, and thus destroy the hopes of everyone in the city. This is Travis's ultimate contradiction. It's the reason he lies to himself constantly, as he wants to be a saint when he knows he's a sinner. What Travis says compared to what he believes and what he does are often contradictions in themselves. Travis's environment is one that he loathes, and that's a concept that I think many of us can relate to. But with Travis, not only does he make things worse for himself by forcing that life to interfere with his own, but he then believes that that life must be the only one there is, and thus wants to see it completely neutralised. We've seen that there is an alternative, but again, Travis doesn't want to know. As Travis sits in his taxi, the dark streets of New York invade Travis's life in their most effective way yet.
Come on, Nick. Get me out of here, all right?
Here, Travis meets Iris. Now instead of driving away, Travis lets the event take its course as Sport arrives to drag Iris away. Travis sits silently and watches the event unfold through his mirror, yet again refusing to interact with this world directly before accepting Sport's money.
Tabby, just forget about this, it's nothing.
Now if you were in this situation and a young girl entered your taxi asking to leave, would you do the same as Travis? No. Travis doesn't stop what's happening so that it can stimulate his animosity. He can now say, see, this is what the entire world is like. He then proceeds to drive through the rough streets of Harlem, probably just because he knows what he's going to encounter. This serves as a reminder to Travis to what he believes the world to be, and he needs to ensure that he can never forget this. We see more of this as he pulls into the garage after his night's work. Sport's $20 bill has been sat next to him all night. The camera pans up, suggesting that he knows it would be best to leave it, but he hesitatingly grabs it before leaving. It's moments like this that show that Travis only antagonises himself. He brings on his own isolation as he walks against an endless brown backdrop into nowhere. We see Travis once more in a sea of blurred faces. Isolated in public is the saddest kind of loneliness when you are surrounded by people. Travis experiences this every day because he doesn't understand them. He lives a small and menial existence. It's the second date with Betsy and he's wearing the exact same clothes he did last time. This is Travis attempting to impersonate a regular person. It's as though he's been told this is how people court with one another. Notice that how we saw Travis in his suit at daytime, yet the date seems to be very late at night. Travis, like on their previous meeting, has been consumed by Betsy and obsessively waited all day for this interaction. The second date is one of the most interesting points in the movie. Initially things go well, and Travis and Betsy share a tender moment.
Then you haven't heard this record yet.
No. But I was thinking maybe, you know, you could listen to it on your record player.
Travis then takes Betsy to a porno theatre.
You gotta be kidding.
What?
This is a dirty movie.
Just the idea of this alone displays Travis is utterly removed from any normal reality, and that he's so absorbed within his own world that he failed to even comprehend that there may be another, the world which Betsy belongs to. He tries to convince her that it's very normal.
No, this is a movie that a lot of couples come to. All kinds of couples go here.
My theory for this is that once again, Travis is lying to himself when he says this. He doesn't actually believe that this is a typical place for couples to come. He wants to bring Betsy into his world, because then he'll be following this pathology of self-hatred and destruction. He lures her into the theatre as if to say, you don't think I'm disgusting, let me just show you how loathsome I am. For Travis, this is a win-win situation, because if Betsy commits herself to Travis, then he's destroyed more innocence in the world. If she refuses, then it just gives Travis more ammunition to believe that there is in fact no good in this world. Betsy's curiosity of Travis only goes so far as she makes the latter decision. She leaves, but Travis has a dilemma because he does obsess over Betsy and is legitimately attracted to her. She begins to walk away, but Travis doesn't want her to leave. The camera moves closer to Travis as once again he becomes more agitated.
Wait a second. I want to talk to you. Wait a second.
But Betsy's mind is made up and she leaves.
Let's go.
Can I call you? Jesus Christ, I got a taxi, huh?
Oh, Betsy. Hi, it's Travis.
We see Travis on the phone attempting to get a hold of Betsy, and we see the most memorable camera movement of the entire film. But first I want to suggest an alternative theory to the scene. We've previously spoken about Travis's paranoia being a catalyst for his imagination. So what if that's the case in this scene? What if Travis isn't talking to Betsy and just pretending as though she's ignoring him?
Did you get my flowers in the... You didn't get them. I sent some flowers.
And yet in the following scene we see the flowers at Travis's place, as if he never even sent them. I understand that Betsy may have sent them back, this is just an idea. Regardless, the outcome is the same. Betsy's rejection causes Travis to feel as though there is nothing left in the world of any virtue. I just think that it's worth considering that Travis has gone through this to convince himself of this fact. Whilst on the phone, we see more of that emotional filmmaking that I referred to. As Travis becomes more a figure of pity, the camera pans away from his conversation as it just becomes too painful to listen to. We stare down the empty hallway, which in turn acts as a tool to increase the anxiety for the audience. Is something about to happen? Is Travis about to do something? This shot suggests that something is brewing inside of Travis, and the only exit for him lies on the dark streets. Because of the situations that he's put himself in, it's the only option that Travis has left.
I tried several times to call her, but after the first call, she wouldn't come to the phone any longer. I also sent flowers, but with no luck.
He returns to the Palatine officers to scold Betsy, and admits to himself that Betsy was just like the rest. Which is true, she is just like the rest of the world. Travis is the one that's different.
I realize now how much she is just like the others, cold and distant. And many people are like that. Women for sure. They're like a union.
Travis describing women like a union suggests that Travis was once obsessed with relationships and finding purpose through them, but now he's obsessed with it in a different way. Travis despises relationships, and the concept of any sort of community or camaraderie he feels is damaging. It's time that Travis acted on this, and it's the next scene that hatches that seed in Travis's mind. Travis picks up a stranger who tells him to park outside a building.
No, don't. Oh, the fucking meter. What are you doing?
Here, Travis is encountering someone that actually verbalizes their dangerous thoughts.
I'm gonna kill her. I'm gonna kill her with a 44 Magnum pistol. I have a 44 Magnum pistol. I'm gonna kill her with that gun. Did you ever see what a 44 Magnum pistol would do to a woman's face? I'm gonna fucking destroy it. Just blow her right apart. That's what I can do to her face.
The interesting thing with this scene is that the stranger is in fact played by Scorsese himself, who we also saw in a previous scene outside of the Palatine headquarters. What this is showing us is that the stranger is just an everyday man, the average person. It suggests that no matter who you are or where you come from, everybody at some point is going to feel like Travis. The stranger expresses all of his negative emotions, whereas Travis represses them. For all we know, the stranger doesn't even act upon these hateful tendencies. This repression inside Travis causes these emotions to fester. He won't admit he has them until they explode. We've seen so far that the most subdued circumstances can fuel Travis's paranoia and then become menacing, so we can only imagine what a legitimate threat does to his mind. The look in his eyes showed that his mind is working endlessly when listening to this man. The irony of this scene is that the most dangerous person is not the man in the back seat. All Travis can do is stare through the mirror, as he has with everyone else that's entered the cab. Anyone that appears in that mirror belongs to the world that he hates. This scene is Travis's trigger, as he perceives the violent route as the solution to his problems. Travis is back at the Belmore Cafe. Again, completely contrasting to his other cabbies, he's alone in the background moving in slow motion. He appears otherworldly. We begin to see Travis more in fragments as he enters, as his mind begins to fall apart. Here we see Travis with his wad of cash, and yet when asked how business is,
Very slow.
This means that Travis has accrued this money over time, and is evidence towards the fact that he's working these long night shifts not for money, but so that it's proof his philosophy is correct. He does his work simply because he wants to see the depravity of this world. This scene also follows the same structure as the previous scene at the Belmore. Travis isolated by the conversation.
Not bad. Another way ahead out there, you know, in California.
As well as displayed on his own in the frame.
I'm shoving on.
As Travis follows Wizard for a chat, Charlie T says goodbye.
Bye, killer.
This is a simple gesture, yet under the racist, paranoid eyes of Travis, it becomes much more. Charlie's goodbye could also be an indication that the rest of the world is aware that there is something inherently wrong with Travis. Because as we go outside, Travis once again stares at a group of black youths. For all we know, he could be imagining this again. Wizard doesn't even seem to notice them. Every time Travis stares with distaste at someone, they have been from a different ethnic group. Travis is the bottom of society's barrel, yet he doesn't want to believe that, and so he chooses the groups that are socially and economically lower than him and interprets them as venal, as he continues to only notice the violence around him. The look that Travis gives is hinting that beneath Travis's surface does in fact lie a killer. This is only exemplified by the conversation Travis has with Wizard.
I just want to go out. I really want to. I got some bad ideas in my head.
It seems as though there's an inner conflict within Travis during this point, as he can't verbalise his emotions, which would go hand in hand with the idea of contradictions, that his mind and his body operate differently. It would also show that Travis does operate on a subconscious level, because even though he claims to be uncertain about his ideals, we've seen patterns in his behaviour. He's continually lied, he's gone out of his way to experience the lowest forms of humanity time and time again, so to say he doesn't know what's going on suggests a refusal to accept that he has a methodology, which is again another lie. Wizard gives a cliche response, which is essentially to do what he does and get on with it.
A man takes a job, and that job, that becomes what he is.
But here we see a contradiction from Wizard. He's a wizard without any wisdom. This shows that the average person does show the same characteristics as Travis, they're just able to accept them. Travis refuses this notion and is left alone in the world, demonstrated as Wizard drives away from him. The conversation ends as it began, with Travis stranded and alone in the streets he despises the most.